First of all, like everything else in life, if you decide to start a business, if you decide to get in the best shape of your life, if you decide to start a podcast or a YouTube channel, all those things are long-term commitments, man. It's something that you don't just get in the best shape of your life and stop working out, right?
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam A. Adams, and today I've got a beast of a person on the podcast. In fact, his show is called Chronicles of a Modern Beast. So Pedro Meneses has been a podcaster for a little while. He's got over 100 episodes that he's published. And one really cool thing is that he's got over 100 ratings and reviews on his podcast. You may or may not know this statistic, but 100 ratings and reviews puts him in the top 0.6% of all podcasts in the entire world. Hell yeah, man. How you doing?
Man. I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. So we are going to figure out like what kind of value we're going to add to our listener. Our listener today is a podcaster. They've been podcasting most likely less than 2 years, so they're fairly new. They might even be launching a show right now. So we're going to add value to that person. Pedro, your bio is already in the show notes. Your podcast link to Chronicles of a Modern Beast is already in the show notes. So we're going to skip the bio, not have to read it for the listener. And I want to go straight into this. Pedro, through your journey of 100 plus episodes, 100 plus ratings and reviews, getting in the top 0.6% based on ratings and reviews, what have you learned that you want to give to a brand spanking new podcaster, less than 2 years or about to launch, that can help them kind of follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, absolutely, man. You know, the first thing that I could tell a new podcaster is to sharpen your axe first. You know, I'm the kind of person that I'm an entrepreneur. So every time I have a new idea, I just jump right in. I jump off the cliff and then I start building the airplane. That's how I act. And honestly, that is something that I've been working on a lot, you know, because I know that's not the right way to do it. I mean, I'm not telling you not to be an action taker. You have to be an action taker, but you also have to be mindful of how do you take action, right? So when I first started my podcast, man, I started it because I had a need to get the message across to the industry that I was serving. There was the craft beer industry. The reason why I did that is because I had a marketing company and we were focusing only in craft breweries and tap rooms and bars. That's how I started my podcast. And I started it because I found that there was a need in that industry. You know, there was not a lot of entrepreneurship message going on in that industry. And that's why I started it. But I really just bought a $50 microphone from Amazon, hit Zoom recording, and that's how I started, you know. So if you go back to the first episode when my show used to call the Brew and Business Show, first episode is a disaster.
It's Wiz Brewing Business Show?
Yeah, the Brew and Business Show, yeah.
Brewer or brewing? I'm sorry.
The brewing business.
Okay, the brewing business. Cool. Love it.
So,
do you still have that one?
Some episodes still there. You know, if you go back in the feed on Apple Podcasts, you can still find some of them.
Is it part of Chronicles of a Modern Beast, or is it a totally separate RSS feed?
You know, man, I live it there because I really just wanted to leave like a blueprint of how I did things, you know, so that's why I just rebranded it and I kept it in the same channel.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So
same channel. So like maybe the first like 50-ish episodes were, no, how many episodes were about beer and craft brewing?
It was about 45, maybe 50.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was after I rebranded it that I started building my audience and start getting more reviews and all that stuff. At that point, I think I had like maybe 15 reviews, maybe 20 reviews. So since I rebranded my podcast, that's when I started getting more engagement. But yeah, man, you know, like I said, I started it and it sounds really bad at the beginning, you know, but like I said before, I'm an action taker. So I think one of the things that I can tell someone trying to start a podcast is, first of all, this is a long-term commitment. This is the reason why I have 110 episodes, and it's been a learning curve. You know, it's been a lot of learning, a lot of lessons that I've been learned through these 100 and almost 12 episodes. Also, I've been developing a lot of skills. It has helped me a lot to get better in my content creation and some other stuff that I like to do. But I think the first thing that you can do if you're getting started is to get clear what it is your message. I have a formula that is called the 4 W's. That is like, what is the message for who it is, what is the purpose of your podcast, and what is the message you want to come across with. So I think when you get clear, it's almost like when you're building your customer avatar in your business, right? When you're getting clear who's your target audience, you're doing the same thing with your podcast. You're getting clear on who's going to be that audience you want to reach out, whether that's entrepreneurs. In my case, that's my point, right? I want to talk to entrepreneurs. What is the message that I want to bring to them, and how to go from good to great, how to go from fearful to fierce, things like that. And that's when you start getting clear, because when you can get to define what is your message, who is your audience, it's going to be easier for you to create that content around your podcast, the type of guests that you want to bring in. I'm sure you have that experience, Adam. Sometimes you bring some guests and it's like, man, this is not really the right fit for my podcast, and that's one of the lessons that I have learned, because I didn't define that at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm making a couple of notes. One of the things that I really want you to go back over so I can have it all is, you said that there's 4 main things that the entrepreneur or the podcaster needs. And the first one was figuring out what's the message, who is it for, what were the other 2?
Yeah. So first of all, you have, like I was saying, like, what is the purpose of your podcast pretty much? I got to pull it up here, man, so I can give you the exact definition.
While you're pulling it up, I want to go over a couple things that you've mentioned. So go ahead and pull that up. Here's one of the things that I liked. So Pedro jumps on, and my very first question, by the way, hey, listen to this, listener. My very first question was not, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get, I didn't say that kind of stuff. I was like, what value do you want to give to a new podcaster? And he said, sharpen your axe. If you've ever heard me say on this show, ready, aim, fire, versus what everybody else teaches you, ready, fire, aim. Pedro's like, it's important, yes, to take action, but that action needs to be mindful or intentional. And you need to be focused. You need to have that. So spend the time to sharpen your axe and develop these 4 things that we're talking about right now. And those are, Mr. Pedro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks a lot. So this is a living document for me. I can even share a copy of it if you want with your audience, man, like a template of how I did this. So it's called the 4 W's, right? So what is a podcast about? And that's when you get clear, like I was telling you, my podcast was for entrepreneurship, right? That is what it's all about. Who is a podcast for? This is where I got to define like what type of entrepreneur I want to reach out, right? Those are ready entrepreneurs. They're ready to go to the next level. They're struggling with different things in their lives that are being a ceiling at that point, right? The third one is where the podcast taking them, right? Like I was telling you, my purpose for my podcast is to take people from good to great, from fearful to fierceful, from average to the most elite version of themselves. That's what I want to take people with my podcast. And then the 4th one is, why should they listen to your show? And that's where I kind of like introduce a little bit of my story, how I went from migrating to the United States, becoming illegal, going through the journey of really start developing myself, getting into entrepreneurship, really working on my mindset, and really start pursuing that elite version of myself. So those are the 4 W's that I have in this document. Like I said, I template with your audience. So, it's a good exercise. It's almost like the same exercise you go through when you're defining who's your perfect audience or you creating your customer avatar. It's a similar process. It's very simple, but it gives you a lot of clarity. And that's what I call sharpening your axe, because you're ready. You're preparing the things that you need. You're putting things in place. So when you're ready to take action, you're going to make less mistakes. I'm not saying you're not going to make mistakes, because you're still going to make mistakes, but you're going to make less mistakes, because it's impossible not to make mistakes,
Yeah. Quick question. How do you make money? Like, what is your business and how do you generate an income?
I'm in real estate. Up to a couple of months ago, our main focus was retail. Now we've transitioned more into the investment side. We're doing wholesale deals. We're working primarily with investors here in Dallas area, because we also launched our Airbnb management company this year. So we are focusing more on that audience, investors, and help them from start to finish, like what is the process to get into an investment property, getting approved, look for the right property for Airbnb or long-term rent or whatever it is they're looking for, walk them through that entire process, get them close on a home, And then we transition that property into our Airbnb management company where we take care of everything else, the management, the booking, all that kind of stuff. That's how I generate my income. And also I have an online store. It's called The Way of the Modern Beast. That is pretty much an e-commerce business that I started. I started as a movement for men. I think it's transitioning more into a movement for men and women, and it's all about, again, becoming the most elite version of yourself, what I call a modern beast,
Yeah.
What I call someone who has core values well defined in their lives, and they have a target in their life, and they work daily to become that person that they really want to be in life.
So do you monetize your podcast at all?
I don't.
Okay. You don't do coaching on men's coaching or business coaching or modern beast coaching or anything like that?
I haven't started yet, man.
Okay.
Because another lesson that I can give to your audience is you have to focus on one thing at a time. Right? So
I love that. Yes.
I know that I throw a bunch of stuff that we're doing right now with my wife because we work together. My wife, she's definitely my partner on everything. So at one point, man, I was very distracted and I was trying to go different directions. So yeah, I have an e-commerce business. I have an online store, but that stuff is pretty much running automatically. At this point, I don't even care. I'm selling t-shirts or the beer product that I sell. If it sells, good. If it's not, fine. It's part of my brand anyway. And I continue to build my brand through my real estate and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But right now, my main focus is real estate, and
okay.
For the things that we have learned, investment in the people in our circle, that's how we created this whole system that, yeah, we have Airbnb, we have investment, we have real retail properties, whatever it is, but everything is inside the same arena, so we have just different ways we can serve our same audience. So that's my main focus right now, because I think, man, as entrepreneurs, we always make that mistake. We try to cover so many things. Like there's opportunities here, people reaching out that they want to do business with you. They want to start another company, a bunch of stuff. And there's nothing wrong about that, but I think you have to focus on one thing. Once that thing can run without you, then move to the next one. And then you move to the next one. Or if you can start putting the right people in place, that can take care of the business. So then you can just overlook your business. That's when things start getting easier. That's when you can say, okay, I can move to the next step. So the reason why I bring that up is because it's in my list of things to do, to help people, coach people, do things like that. But at this point, I'm still not doing it because I'm building the foundation for this real estate business that is just growing really fast right now, so I cannot put my hands in something else, but I'm here building the thing that is going to provide for all of the other stuff that I'm trying to build,
Yeah. I have some thoughts here based on, you've got to figure out what is the purpose of the podcast. It's one of the 4 values, I think, that you've outlined for us already. And for your podcast, I'm seeing 2 things that your podcast is doing for you. One of them is that it's a passion. Like you really believe in this. You have really been focused on personal development yourself, developing your own skills, getting yourself out there, learning, growing, connecting, being the best version of you that you possibly can. So partly I see that one of the purposes of your podcast, in my point of view, seems like it's a passion project. And the other reason that I think you have your podcast, just it seems like, is just for branding, name recognition, growing your business, growing your brand, being able to be that next step for what you want to do, potentially growing a little bit of some of the other businesses that you have. But I want to hear it from you because this is just my perception of it. And I want to see, like, how close am I? If you take your podcast and just determine, like, what is it about? What is the actual purpose of your show? Share that with us and the listener.
Absolutely, man. You're actually not too far away from my main purpose of the podcast. Of course, I want to grow my brand, do all that kind of fun stuff. But the way I see my podcast, man, is just a way for me to give back, because I think in everybody's journey, here's one of the first thoughts that I had when I started pivoting my podcast, rebranded it, turned it into the Chronicles of a Modern Beast. We always hear the same stories out there, people sharing their stories. They're coming from poverty or drugs, abuse, whatever the case is, right? Or in my case, it didn't came from all that stuff, but I come from the other side of the spectrum where I had it all. And I decided to lose everything and start from zero, So that being said, I always notice, man, that a lot of people share their stories, but I'm the kind of person that I need to know the details about your story, because that's in those details I'm going to be able to find that answer. So one of the purpose for me is to really, sometimes I have guests that I have to ask really hard questions because I want to know the details, you know? I want to know the details. I want to know the thought process that you went through when you were overcoming whatever situation you were trying to overcome. So the purpose of my podcast, man, is really just to leave those clues to people, to inspire people to, they can hear somebody else saying like, man, I went through this stuff, and they can identify with that situation and see how other people was able to overcome different situations in life, but not only overcome that situation, but also what was the process that they went through, like this is what I did. This is my thought process. That's the goal, to really just leave that as a blueprint out there for people that can listen, identify with the stories, and really motivate them to take action, So I see it as a way to giving back, as just bringing those experiences, not only my experiences, but the experiences of the guests that I bring in.
I want to ask you a couple questions on this. And I think this is going to be really helpful for another podcaster who's listening. Sounds like you're one of the biggest things. It does the branding. It is your passion, but it's meant to give back. You really want to know the details of people's story. You want to share that with the listener. You want to figure out that person's thought process. You want them to listen and be able to identify with your guest and leave those clues for them. I want to understand, because we talked earlier about being intentional and mindful, taking action, but like mindful action. So if this is your purpose, this is the goal of the podcast, to give back and to give these things to your listener, how do you do that on the podcast? What questions do you ask? How in depth do you go? What is your process of extracting those things in a real sense, so that you're actually giving it to the listener?
Man, my approach when I'm recording a podcast is when I'm sitting with a friend that I know for a long time and really just want to have a live conversation and touch those points. I do have a couple of friends in my life where that every time we get together, man, is just really deep conversations, So that's the mindset that I'm trying to get into it, like having a conversation with my guests. And then as soon as they touch something that is remarkable in their life, that's what I like to start asking questions in regards to that, like how you can, pretty much asking them to expand more into that, here's a story behind it, how they got there, how they overcome it, things like that, one of the questions that I always like to ask is when, let's say there's someone who, I don't know, overcame bankruptcy. They went through bankruptcy or something like that, right? I always like to ask, yeah, you did overcome that stuff, but when you were in that middle of that situation, when you were at the bottom, you didn't know what to do. What was the mental, like I was saying before, what is the thought process that went to your mind? I want to hear the thought process. I want to hear how do you overcame that. Sorry about this, but how do you overcame that bitch voice in the back of your head telling you that you couldn't do X, Y, Z? That's what I need to know. I want to hear that. So I like to ask questions like that,
Yeah. Cool. And so that gets the process, that gets the mindset, and it does leave a lot of clues for your listener. Go ahead. It sounds like you had more on that. Is that true?
Yeah, no. So the other thing that I wanted to say is, I think if you bring guests to your podcast, is for them to tell their story. And there's this sales process that I like to use when I'm on a sales call, and it's very effective. And the number one question that we teach our people that you need to ask, and you can change this question when you're in a sales call, it's called like, what made you decide to reach out? And then you shut up and you don't talk and you let them talk, right? And sometimes that conversation can be a 30-minute conversation, a 45-minute conversation. By the end of the day, you never ask for the sell and they give you the sell, right? So I use the same mindset too. When I ask a question, I shut up because the episode is not about me. It's about them. It's about their story. They come into your podcast. They ask you to be on your podcast because they want to tell their story. They want to help somebody else too. That's why I don't like to bring people when they send me an email, like trying to sell me with this elevator pitch or that they created millions of dollars. I can care less about how much money you make. I want to know what value you can bring. And in order to bring that value, I need to stay quiet, ask an open-ended question so they can just tell me everything I need to hear,
Yeah. A long time ago, and I used to do more sales calls, and I was trying to help people figure out how to do that. And the way that I worded it was help them sell themselves, have that person sell themselves. And that's exactly what you said. When you jump on those calls, you basically say, what made you decide to reach out? And now, why me? You're like, why me? Why are you working with me? Why are you calling me instead of someone else? And now they're like, well, I resonate with you. Well, I saw you. And everything that they say after that is like selling themselves on working with you. So cool that you mentioned that. What kind of sales calls do you do? It's for real estate or what?
Yeah, for real estate.
Okay.
Yeah, primarily because that's pretty much the majority of our clients for Airbnb company come through, like we already started having clients that they already own Airbnbs and they're reaching out for management, but it's a little bit different conversation, but usually it's through real estate.
That's pretty cool. It's not about them. I mean, it's about them, not me. Just out of curiosity, be honest. Sometimes in this call with you and I will hear something that you mentioned and I'll kind of relate it to my own life. And I'll mention that to the listener. For example, like a moment ago, you said on my sales calls, I asked, what made you decide to reach out? And then I interjected something to the effect of, hey, I used to say, let them sell themselves. When I say that, Pedro, is this going against what you're saying when you're saying it's not about me, it's about them, I'm letting them tell the story? I really want to hear your opinion. So it's basically, you mentioned, and it seemed like it was important to you, that when you're interviewing someone else, you need to shut the hell up. For lack of a better word, you basically said, it's not me that needs to talk. I want my guest to shine. Do you feel like if we interject some of our own stuff along the way and pepper it in, and we're hoping that helps the listener get more out of it when we say, let them sell themselves? That was my part. Do you feel like that's too much if your goal is to let them talk about them?
I don't think so, man. I think you have to pay close attention to what they're saying, because as you just said, there's going to be keys, there's going to be specific things that your guest is going to mention that you just want to kind of like piggyback on those things so they can just feel like, oh yeah, and expand more into that. So I think that's your whole job, when you're interviewing someone, they are the star of the show, right? They are the one that are here on your show to bride. You just help them put more wood into the fire,
Okay, yeah.
Things you can talk and insert it through the conversation, but not really taking over the conversation and pretty much tell all your stuff that people already know from you. You know what I mean?
Yes, I definitely know what you mean. And I want to ask you on a quote that I quoted you earlier. You said, the podcast, you basically let our listener know that when they get involved in a podcast, it's a long-term commitment. You said this is a long-term commitment. And I'm curious why you say that. Like, I think that there's a lot of podcasters out there that decide to start the show. And in like, sometimes it's a few weeks and sometimes it's a few months. They say to themselves, this isn't working. I should cut my losses and just quit. And so I'm hearing you basically, in my own mind, it's basically telling that person, why the hell are you quitting after 3 months? This was supposed to be a long-term commitment. Give us more of that information on why is podcasting a long-term commitment? How long is a long-term commitment? How many months or years does that mean to you? And is there anything that we can do to kind of like really do that at a high level?
Couple things, man. You've been doing podcasts longer than I do. You don't understand that the average podcaster put like 7, 8 episodes out there and then they quit.
Yeah.
I believe that, first of all, like everything else in life, if you decide to start a business, if you decide to get in the best shape of your life, if you decide to commit to someone, like in marriage, if you decide to start a podcast or a YouTube channel, I think all those things are long-term commitments, man. It's something that you don't just get in the best shape of your life and stop working out, right?
Absolutely not. No.
When it comes to how long you've been doing a podcast, I think it depends. Obviously, you have to pass the 6, 7, or 8 or whatever episodes that an average podcaster produces, because even if you just do 10 more, you're already above average, right? But I think it all depends. I mean, that's why you have to get clear, like, what is the goal of your podcast? Like, is this something that you want to do for I don't know. Like for me, I haven't decided that yet. I really haven't, to be honest with you. I haven't decided how long I want to keep doing my podcast. When it's going to be like, okay, this is what we have, 400, 500 episodes, whatever. And this is just going to be like the blueprint I want to leave behind to the people that is listening. Or maybe I'm just going to do it for the rest of my life, because my life keeps evolving and there's going to be different seasons coming, right? But if you just want to do a podcast for, I don't know, a specific audience, and you know that you can just go like a 2 or 3 seasons and that's it. And then you can use that content and resell it as a course or whatever. I mean, it just depends, what do you want? But definitely you just don't want to do it for 3 months. And if you're quitting just because your podcast is not getting downloads, it's because it's only your mom is listening to it, and you decide to quit because of that, that's an average mentality. Because everything in life takes time, and I think the podcast, man, just because how podcasting works, there's so many podcasts out there. There's so many people trying to get into this, but they don't have a clear definition and a clear goal as to why they want to do it. And that's probably why they quit after 3 months. And probably because they're going after the shiny object too, right? It's like people on social media. Oh, their video didn't went viral, then they quit, right? Like I started my business, I got into entrepreneurship like 4 years ago, and I'm not even close to where I want to be, but I'm not quitting. This is a lifetime commitment. Like everything that you do for your life, I believe has to, in entrepreneurship at least, I know that I've removed that mentality of like, oh, there's going to be a finish line. There's not going to be a finish line, man. The only time I'm going to doing something is the day that I don't have air in my lungs anymore. And that's the ultimate goal because, but obviously when I'm going to be 50, 60, my work is going to look different. I'm not going to be working in the business. I'm going to be working on my businesses or doing some other stuff. Who knows, right? But I will never going to stop working. So I think the same things apply with your podcast, just the definition, what it is, how long you want to do it, what is the goal? If your goal tells you like, okay, this is my goal, I should do this for 3 years and commit to do it for 3 years,
Yeah. As you're talking about this, you're basically saying like, if you're starting a business, it takes time. If you're getting in shape, you don't just get there and then quit. When you decide to get married, you want to plan on doing that for your whole life. Everything in life takes time. And you were talking about how like you're not really in the place that you ultimately want to be. You're not at that place yet. You're still learning. You're still growing. You're in a great place, but you want more. And some of us as entrepreneurs, we definitely want things done yesterday. I'm sure you're that way. I'm that way. Yeah. And I had this client. We serve podcasters. So she's a brand new podcaster, and she has, at 5 weeks, she called me and she's like, hey, Adam, I'm nervous. I don't think this is going very well. She had a few thousand downloads already just after 5 weeks. And I told her 2 things. And I think that the listener needs to hear this too. Number one, I said, with your podcast, in those first 5 weeks of you launching, you're already at numbers that many other podcasters who launch without doing the marketing and stuff, where they barely get after a year or 2. You're at a place where a huge majority of podcasters aren't even there after a year or 2. And she's like, really? It doesn't seem that big. And I'm like, you're already doing great. So that was the first thing, is even just a little bit of traction is something that not everybody gets. But second thing that I thought was most important is I said to her name is Amanda. I said, Amanda, I got to tell you a story. It was last Wednesday. We're recording on a Wednesday today. And so 1 week ago today, I paid off a couple of rentals. Pedro, you're in real estate as well. And so I had just a couple of houses, a couple of small mortgages, and I just had so much extra money in the bank because of my podcast that I was just like, I guess I'm just going to pay off these mortgages. Like, what else am I going to do with that money? These are high interest mortgages because they're private loans at 1% a month, 12% annualized. And I'm like, yeah, just may as well pay it off. I've got all the money sitting there. Right. And all of the money came from my podcast. All of that money came directly from my podcast. So regardless if it was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, like I was able to pay off a couple of mortgages and it came from my podcast. And then I said to her, I said, Amanda, I've had my podcast for 2 years now. I've been publishing episodes for over 2 years. this didn't happen in my first 5 weeks. And she's like, oh, okay. So you're telling me I got to keep going. And I think that's the big takeaway is, yeah. And Pedro, you keep saying the average people, podcasters stop at 6, 7, 8 episodes. I've heard the statistic that something like 90% of podcasts don't make it past 6 or 10 episodes. So it's basically exactly what you're saying. And so I want to find out, how do you get past 100 episodes? Like, what made Pedro Meneses and this rebranded podcast? In a minute, I'm going to ask you more about rebranding, but what made you be able to get to 100, 112 and growing episodes when you know darn well 90+% of them would have quit at 6 or 10 episodes?
2 things, man. One is called consistency. And second is because I'm really determined to be above average. And I think, like you were talking about, man, I think it applies on everything. And I think a podcast is something that a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to get into it. But here's the thing, man. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, whatever it is that you want to do in life, I think you need to start looking at all these idiots on social media telling you how successful you can be in 30 days, in 90 days, in 6 months, in a year, because that is the biggest lie you're ever going to hear in your life. Because success doesn't happen overnight. That's what I was telling you a minute ago. That's what I married myself to, this process of being an entrepreneur, of growing a business or doing a podcast. And I don't know what else is going to come. And yeah, you're right. I'm not satisfied. I am, but I'm not. It's called blissful dissatisfaction, because I'm grateful for where I am. I'm grateful for what I have so far. But yet I want more. You know why? Because I understand that I have the capability to gain more, to win more, to get better, to improve my life, and do that until the last day on this earth. So why in the hell am I going to just stop? Why am I going to just live a life of conformity? That's what kills people.
Yeah.
So I think, but the key is consistency. A lot of people, I love to hear some of my mentors, man, all the time, like when they would like to troll the haters. It's like, oh yeah, look at my 15 years overnight success.
Yep.
Because people don't see it, man. People see the flashy things. And the other thing on my podcast, I want people to understand that there's nothing flashy. One of the words that I hate the most, man, in entrepreneurship is the secret. There's no secret, man. It's hard work and consistency and discipline. That's what you need if you want to win in life, period.
All right. I've got so much stuff written down here. And bro, the listener needed to hear all this stuff. Like, a podcaster had to hear everything that you just shared. I'm hearing that consistency is really important. You mentioned that more than once. It really comes down to consistency. The key is consistency. And it was the first thing you mentioned when I asked you, like, how did you get past, 6, 7, 8 episodes and even 100, 112 episodes? What made you be able to do that? And it's like, well, consistency. But then you said the second thing is you're determined to become above average. And I think the real word that we're hearing there is it's determination. I've got a tattoo, and it basically came from I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I can't think of Calvin Coolidge. It's basically about persistence and determination give you endless potential, omnipotence. And so I'm hearing you say, like, it's that determination, it's that persistence, it's like that ruthless, unrelenting, you will not quit. You're determined to do this. And I think that the listener needs to hear that. You mentioned there's no get rich quicks. That's all fake. There's no secret. The success doesn't happen overnight. Your mentors, they didn't just get successful like after one day. They're not millionaires because they launched a podcast yesterday. Exactly. It takes time. The other thing that you mentioned, and I don't want the listener to miss it, is you kept saying, I'm grateful. You kept saying, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this. And that gratitude is something that I think all of us could learn from you, is to express the gratitude, to feel the gratitude. That helps us to be able to keep going forward. I still really want to get to what was that part that I was going to get? Oh, the rebranding. We need to get to that. I'm hearing you, basically, you've got a strong mindset. You're focused on mindset, and that is helping you get there. One quick question before we go into the rebranding. is you mentioned, I like to hear my mentors say it was 15 years. It was a 15-year overnight success, for example. And all I want to ask you is like, if their listener is hearing that you had a mentor, should they take that as a mentor would be good for them as well?
100%. 100%, man. I think that's another misconception a lot of people have, like, oh, why am I gonna put money into this mastermind or a mentor? Man, I have spent maybe a couple 6 figures in mentors. Time I put money into a mentor, the right mentor, by the way, I double my money. Because the purpose of a mentor is to help you avoid or do the mistakes that they already made and help you get to your goal a little bit faster. I said a little bit because no mentor out there is going to get you there immediately. Man, I just really like to talk about this a lot because it's even a universal law, man. Look around us, look around the world, just stop for a second and look around you. How long it takes for a tree to grow? Like, there's a universal
30
law.
years.
Yeah, exactly. This is applied for every life. People don't get that. And it applies for your life and your goals as well. So man, but a mentor is definitely going to help you navigate the process better. A mentor should give you the blueprint so you can follow it, stick to it, and not make the mistakes that are going to take. If your mentor took in 20 years, that might help you get there in 15, for example. And at the end of the day, you have to shift your mindset too, because you're not paying for a mentor. You're investing in yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. And personal growth seems really important to you. It seems like you've been focused on it for a while and a big part of your podcast as well. Yeah. All right. I want to take a quick break. When we're coming back from the break, though, I want to talk about like, how did you rebrand? What did it take? Was it hard? Was it easy? Was it scary? Were you afraid of it? Just kind of get that feeling of where you were, just like you do with your guests. And what were you thinking and what kind of held you back? What's the best practices if the listener ever wants to rebrand? But I'm also going to ask you another question just on your top advice for a new podcaster, something that we haven't talked. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We are back with Pedro Meneses from Chronicles of a Modern Beast, and he is a effing beast. And right now we're talking about how the Chronicles of a Modern Beast used to be about beer, and he left those episodes in there. If you recall, prior to the rebrand, he said he only had 15 to 20 ratings and reviews after like 45-ish episodes. And he's barely doubled that now, barely over doubled that, but way more than doubled the ratings and reviews. So just to give you an example, rebranding might possibly be good for you. And so I want to find out from Pedro, all of the things about the rebranding, how it was, how it felt, what he needed to do. And then we're going to end with one giant piece of advice that he needs to give you. But let's start with this rebranding. I'm really curious.
Absolutely, man. When I first thought about it, it was a little bit scary, not going to lie to you, because obviously that voice in the back of my head telling me like, you're failing at this. It was there all the time, because I started something, and sometimes, and because the podcast was attached to that marketing company that I had, I think that's why I was feeling a little bit like as a failure, because like the marketing company failed because it happens in the middle of the pandemic, right? So the craft beer industry, man, almost got crashed, like completely disappeared. I was doing a lot of work for free. So then I'm like, man, this is failing. This is not working. My podcast is attached to this. It's going to be a complete failure, but I don't want to stop doing it. So yeah, the fear was there. But man, I think the main topic of 2020 was pivoting, right? I think that year taught all of us. So I decided to pivot, and I decided to, I need to find purpose that I want to do for my podcast, right? And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you guys remember, I told you when I first started the podcast, I didn't sharpen my axe. right? So when I came to realize that I wanted to rebrand my podcast, wanted to take my podcast to a different direction, that's when I came to realize that when I first started, I didn't take the time to go over the process that I shared with you, the 4Ws, right? And get clear of what was the purpose of my podcast, the message, the people that I wanted to reach out to. I was not clear on that. So that was an important moment in the rebranding of the podcast, because that failure took me to really stop for a second and realize the things I needed to get clear on. And that's how I came with the new topic of the podcast. But at the same time, I was working on building my e-commerce, the way of the modern beast, and working on that movement. So that's when I started putting it all together, because I took the time to sit down and get clear on those 4 things, my message, my audience, and where I wanted to take them from, where I wanted to take my audience to. So that's pretty much how I rebranded it, And then when I was working on the way of the modern beast, that is my online store and the movement that I'm building for men. And well, not for men anymore, man, because it's crazy how I have some shirts that say "Make Masculinity Great Again" and hats, and 50% of the people buying those shirts are women. So I think the brand is growing, and it's expanding not only to men, but also other like women and other people that are supporting the movement. So, and everything is focused on entrepreneurship. So that's how I end up, let's call these the Chronicles of a Modern Beast. And I choose Chronicles because I like to be a little bit fancy,
Cool. Well, I got a few questions on that. Okay. Number one, was it scary to rebrand the podcast? Was it liberating to rebrand the podcast, or both? Tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Both, because at that point, even when you understand consistency, man, like almost 50 episodes in, or like actually 50, I don't remember, I need to check, but let's say 50, even 50 episodes in, you're like, man, do I really want to keep doing this? I mean, I also have the same thoughts, like the same thoughts that someone at the 6-7 episode is having, like, should I continue with this? Even at 112 episodes, I still have the same thoughts, Yeah. Even at this point doing podcasts, I still have that bitch voice in the back of my head telling me, like, you suck at this every single time I'm about to record an episode. So yeah, it was scary, because I didn't know at that time, like, am I going to be successful? Is it going to continue to grow? What people is going to think about it? All those thoughts were coming to my mind. But at the same time, it was liberating, because again, I got clear. I wasn't clear on my podcast before, but when I rebranded it, I got clear on what was my goal. I got clear on who I wanted to help. I got clear on the message I wanted to put out there. So when I found out and structured that foundation, hell yeah, it was liberating, and it was actually exciting, because that's what I'm insisting on this, man. When you get clarity, when you take the time to get clarity, where do you want to go? What it is you want to do? What is your target? Like, you gain this excitement, and then it is liberating, because then you have a goal, you have a target, and you focus and go straight to it.
Yeah. All right. What about this? What are some of the logistics that needed to happen? We get the scary, we get the liberating, we get the being intentional, getting clear with what you want out of it. We get the taking those 4 different things and making it so that you can rebrand. But like, what did you have to rebrand? Was it the intro? Was it the artwork? Like yourself? Kind of what went into a rebrand for a podcast that we need to be conscious of?
All of it. I changed the name, colors, my personality too in the podcast. Attaching it more to like my other thing that I'm building with my personal brand, more of my touch, and intro, everything,
Did the music change too?
Everything, yeah. The music,
wow,
yeah. I changed completely, 100%.
Okay,
rebranded. Yeah, I didn't. It was like, if I'm gonna start something new, it's gonna be 100% new. I'm not gonna take anything that I did with the previous one. I'm gonna do everything brand new. Yeah.
So you've got to do all of those things. What was it like talking to like Apple and the RSS feed and telling them that now your podcast is called something else? Because when we start a podcast, sometimes we have to like give them the suggestion of what that name would be, and then they will approve or not approve of it. Some people don't actually get approved for their podcast name. So for you, like you switching the name, what did it take you to like call somebody, or was it all online? How did that work?
To be honest with you, man, I use Libsyn. for my podcast platform. I literally just went in there, changed the name, submitted it, and nobody asked any questions.
So it was that easy. Cool.
Yeah, it was
And
that easy.
what made the rebrand successful besides things that you've already talked about? I'm curious about, like, how did you go from 10-ish, 15-ish ratings and reviews in 45 or 50 episodes to 100 plus by adding those other 45, 50 more episodes? Like, what did you do to get ratings and reviews? What did you do to get the traction? What did you do to increase listener base after it changed?
You know, one of the things was that I started speaking to the right audience, because when we were in business show, it was, we were talking about beers and all that stuff, but it was mainly also like, I wanted to provide the craft beer industry a platform to learn entrepreneurship, because there's no such topic like that in that industry, you know? But like the topic of entrepreneur, like having an entrepreneurship audience really didn't change that much. But because that was my message too, part of my message with the Brewing Business Show, and that audience is not interested in getting better, it didn't resonate with them. When I did the change and I changed everything, and I wanted to put like, this needs to be for entrepreneurs, I want to help people in their self-development journey, that's when it started resonating with my audience. That's when people start paying more attention. And that's when I start getting the ratings, because again, it sounds like I know I sound like a broken record, but it is just that focus, man, on really just putting the right message in front of the right people.
Yeah. What's the last thing that you need to give to a new podcaster that we haven't talked about today?
Besides consistency, really, man, like anything else, it's just really just working and investing in yourself. Because you're a better person, gets you better at interviewing people. You get more creative, you know, and you allow yourself to keep evolving. You mentioned, I'm very heavy in self-development, because it's the one thing that have helped me change my life. It is the one thing that has helped me get better in my business. It's the number one thing that has helped me help other people too. And of course, is the number one thing that has helped me with my podcast as well. So investing in yourself and really, really having that intentionality to just be better, man. You know, I think that's something that you owe it to yourself pretty much.
Yeah. This has been a good episode with Pedro Meneses from Chronicles of a Modern Beast. And I want you, if you're listening, to don't go away after this episode, because on the next episode, I just want to pour right into you, share some stuff that you need. It won't be an interview. That's going to be a solo episode just with you and me having a little dialogue. So jump right in. I'll see you there. Thanks again, Pedro. Bye for now. You know, I really don't say this nearly enough. I don't mention this, and I feel horrible, because it's a great resource for you to be able to take your podcast to the next level. And it's simply a free resource that I don't need your email or anything. It's just a podcasting course that I created that is ended up putting in the very first 6 episodes of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely going to want to just check out those first 6 episodes, see how they can help you improve your podcast, get in front of more people, and have a better result where you're making more money through the podcast, etc. So much can happen after you listen through episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you haven't done it, go do it now. And by the way, if you're subscribed, you'll keep hearing more great content. So to those of you who are, I'll see you on the next episode.